today is like I will tell you the skills which are required for a Salesforce Devops engineer, and I will also show you what are the topics and tools which are going to cover in this particular course. So I was said most of you have knowledge on the Salesforce platform. So that is an advantage because for in order to handle the activities of this role, so it requires some understanding of the Salesforce platform. So as a majority of you have knowledge on Salesforce platform, so it will be somewhat easy for you to understand the things as well. So before starting, so myself, my name is Sai, and I have like around 6+ of years of experience into the Salesforce platform. So initially, I worked as a developer, but post that I started working as a Salesforce Devops engineer. So I do have experience of working on multiple CI/CD Salesforce tools. So let me first begin with the skills that are required for this particular role. One more thing is I was also said there are few people who have joined my earlier demo session as well. I might repeat few things. There are few people who have joined newly today. From the next session onwards, what happens is we will start with the regular course content. So first, let me tell you the skills that are required for this particular role. So, in order to handle this particular role, so you will require a knowledge on Salesforce platform. At least if you have Salesforce administrative knowledge, so that will be good. So the reason why you should have Salesforce administrative knowledge is so what happens is in order to do or handle certain activities of this particular role, what happens is without administrative knowledge, so you won't be able to handle those activities confidentially. So what happens is as part of this role, so you'll be primarily involved in migrating the components from one environment to another environment. And when you do that, what happens is you will get some kind of issues. So in order to resolve those issues, you should have some basic understanding on the Salesforce platform, without which you won't be able to resolve those issues. And one more thing is apart from that, so one more thing is there is a tool called as Copado. So this particular Copado tool is completely built on Salesforce platform. It is a kind of application which is built on the Salesforce platform. So when you get a chance to work on this particular tool called as Copado, so in order to implement few things, what happens is you will definitely require administrative knowledge. So as you are already aware of the Salesforce administrative concepts, so sometimes what happens is you will be required to create validation rules, flows, and approval processes as well. So in order to implement few things on a tool like Copado. So that is the reason you should have some knowledge on Salesforce administration. So moving on to the other skills apart from the Salesforce administration. So what you should have is you should have an idea on how you can create the Salesforce environments. And so there is something called as refreshing of the environments as well. So you should even have an idea of the how we can refresh the environments in Salesforce. Apart from this, so apart from creating and refreshing the environments, so the next thing is you should have an idea on Git. So when it comes to Git, so Git is a version control system. So you should have an idea on how we can push the application code to Git, and how we can deploy the application code from Git to a Salesforce. Or apart from this, there are few other features which you should be aware on Git. So you should have an idea on Git and its features. So next is you should have an idea on the Salesforce build tools. So when it comes to the build tools, so what we have is there are multiple build tools available. So out of these multiple build tools, SFDX is one of the most widely used build tool. So you should have a knowledge on how we can retrieve and deploy the changes using SFDX. Apart from SFDX, there is one more build tool which is called as Ant migration tool. Both of these are command line tools. So knowing one tool will be sufficient, because the overall the overall goal of both of these tools will be same. Both will be used in order to retrieve and deploy the components from one environment to another environment. And apart from this, like you should also have knowledge on data loading tools as well. So like the reason why you should have knowledge on data loading tools is like as a DevOps engineer on Salesforce platform, you will be asked to do data loads as well, like on some types of projects. So like that's the reason you should have an understanding on the data loading tools and like what is the purpose of data loading tools and how we can export and import the data using these data loading tools. And apart from this, you should have knowledge on how we can set up the CI/CD process for Salesforce projects. Like you should have knowledge on setting these process by using at least couple of tools. So if you have this knowledge, so then it is sufficient in order to handle most of the activities of this particular role. So now if you look at the content, course content, like the topics which we are going to cover as part of this particular course. So let me open the course content doc. So you can get the course content doc from the institute people, like once the call gets completed. So like we are going to cover like a couple of build tools, SFTX and migration tool. And apart from that, like there is also a tool called as Workbench. So Workbench is a web-based tool, like it will be used in order to migrate components from one environment to another environment, and it can also be used in order to like do data loads, and there are some other activities as well which we can do with the help of Workbench. So primarily what we will do is like we will concentrate on how we can migrate components using Workbench, and like we'll start with Workbench because it is a web-based tool. What happens with the web-based tool is like you can retrieve and deploy the components just by point and clicking. So after that, we will move to SFTX. So SFTX is a command line tool. So in order to like achieve the in order to retrieve and deploy the components using SFTX, you need to run a certain commands. So like first, after we get a basic understanding on how we can retrieve and deploy the things using the Workbench, like when we move on to SFTX, you will feel a little comfortable instead of directly starting with SFTX. So after that, I will we are going to cover Git. We are going to see what is mean by Git and what are all the features which we should be aware on Git as a DevOps engineer. So after that, we'll also see how we can retrieve and migrate Salesforce components using and migration tool. So next is like we will see something called as sandboxes. Sandboxes is nothing but sandbox is equivalent to environment. So specifically on Salesforce platform, environments will be called as sandboxes. So like we will see like what are all the different types of sandboxes, how we can create a sandbox on Salesforce platform, and how we can refresh a Salesforce sandbox. So after that, so like we are going to cover something called as chain sets. So chain sets is a native deployment feature offered by Salesforce. Like there are some disadvantages with chain sets. So in order to overcome the disadvantages of these chain sets, like we will go with the other build tools like SFTX and migration tool. So after this, like we are going to cover a tool called as Copado. So this particular Copado tool is one of the leading ISV tools. ISV in the sense like you can call it as an automated tool. Like we are going to see how we can set up the CI/CD process for a Salesforce project using this particular Copado tool. So when how we are going to cover this particular tool is like we will take an example of a real-time project. So like we will take an example of a fresh project. So we will implement all of the things from scratch. So we will start from creating the orgs, and after creating the orgs, we will create a repository and we will create branches inside the repository. And after that, so likewise, like we are going to do each and every activity that needs to be done in order to set up a CI/CD process for a fresh Salesforce project. So we can create a trial in order to see the futures of this particular Copado tool. So Copado offers trial accounts to be created. So these trial accounts can be used by learners and even someone who want to explore the features of Copado, they can make use of these trial accounts. So we can make use of that particular trial account, and with the help of that trial account, we can learn most of the features that are offered by Copado. So after that, so when it comes to Copado tool, there are two variants. One is Copado Enterprise and the other one is Copado Essentials. So we are going to see the other variant as well, which is called as Copado Essentials. Next is next thing is we are going to see how we can set up a CI/CD process for a Salesforce project using SFDX and GitHub, and the other one is SFDX and Bitbucket. So in order to set up the CI/CD process using SFDX and GitHub, or SFDX and any other Git provider, so like you will require some knowledge on shell and YAML scripting. So like we are going to cover some basics of shell scripting, and we are going to cover like how the YAML scripting. So like what we will do is like while setting up these two processes, so we will make use of YAML scripts in order to configure the CI/CD pipelines. So like for both of this, like we will again consider the case of setting up a CI/CD process for a fresh Salesforce project, and we will do all of the things whichever are required to do in order to set up the process. Like we will do the same thing for both of these. So after that, what we are going to do is like we are going to see a tool called as AutoRabbit. When it comes to the tool called as AutoRabbit, like it won't be possible to create trial accounts because it is a completely licensed tool. So like even for learning purpose, they won't offer any trial account. So like I will give you a overview on how we can set up the CI/CD process using AutoRabbit. So apart from this, like there are like a lot of variety of tools available in the market for Salesforce DevOps. But what happens is like when you have an understanding on how we can set up the process using couple of tools, so like you will be in a position to set up the process using any other tool, because like the steps involved in setting up the process will remain the same even though the tool gets changed. So like the way how we can configure the things gets changed from tool to tool, but the overall process remains the same. So one more thing is like even for these two cases, for these two projects like SFDX plus GitHub and SFDX plus Bitbucket, like we are going to start like implement them from scratch. And apart from this, so like while like in the process of learning the features of either the Copado or these two tools, what happens is like we will pick examples of the activities which our real-time DevOps, Salesforce DevOps engineers will do. So like what we will do is like we will split we will take examples of the real-time activities which are performed by the real-time DevOps engineers, and we will learn all of the features of these tools by implementing those real-time activities. So that's how the course goes on. So like this is regarding the course content. So now, so what I will do now is like I will tell you like what is meant by DevOps and what is the purpose of DevOps, and next what we will do is like we will see like how we can migrate things using Workbench. So like I will quickly tell you like how we can migrate things using Workbench. So first is like in order to understand what is meant by DevOps and what is the purpose of DevOps, you should understand like where DevOps is used. So where DevOps is used means like so DevOps is one process which will be used in the process of delivering a software application. So like it is one process which will be used in the delivery of software application. Okay, so I'm saying that DevOps is one process which will be used in the in the process of delivering a software application. So now, what is the meaning of delivery? So, like in order to understand the meaning of delivery, so first you should understand a few terms. So, like one is environment. So, environment in software terminology is nothing but it is it is the place. So, it is the place where the application lives or runs in. Lives or runs in. So environment is the place where an application lives or runs in. So if you take an application on our system, like all of you will be using systems. Like if you take an application on system, what happens is like if you look at the underlying things beneath that particular application, what happens is like that application is hosted on a on a computer. So like if you take computer, what happens is like computer has hardware components like memory, CPU, and we will have something called as monitor, and we will have something called as keyboard. So like if you look at the underlying parts of a computer, like basically like we will have something called as CPU, memory, and there are a lot of other components as well. So like on top of all these components, what happens is like there will be something called as operating system, and on top of operating system, what happens is like an application will run. So like in order for an application to run, so like that should have all of these things in the bottom. So like without this, like application can't exist. So environment is nothing but which contains all of these things. So like it will contain and something called as the hardware components, as well as it will contain the operating system, and as well as it will also contain all of the things which are required for an application to run. So generally, like for an application to run, so it will require something called as libraries or configuration files as well. So to keep it simple, you can remember an environment as something something or a place where the application lives or run. So, and next thing is what is mean by a live environment? So live environment is something so where the application will be used by the end user. So the primary goal of any application is in order to make some kind of business using that particular application. So for every application in real time, what happens is like there will be end users who will be accessing that particular application. So the place where an application will be accessed by the end users is called as live environment or production environment. So apart from production environment, so what happens is before speaking about the other environments, so now the next thing is how the development of software application happens is for some reason the development of application doesn't happen directly in the live environment or production environment. So there are a few reasons for it. So even I tell you those reasons now, you won't be able to understand them now. So we will see those reasons in a later session. So once the course gets started. But for now, there are some reasons because of which the development of application can't be done in a live environment or production environment. So because of this, what happens is people will do the development of an application in something called as development environments. And one more thing is after the development of application gets completed in development environment, so the application can't be moved directly to the live environment or production environment. Again, there are reasons for this. So the primary reason for this is without testing the application, so without testing the features of the application whether they are working as expected or not, so we can't move them to the live environment or production environment. Because if we do that, what happens is there will be some kind of loss that occurs to the business. So if you take a simple, in order to understand this, if you take a simple example of a banking application. So now what happens with the banking application is people will make use of banking applications in order to transfer money from one account to another account. Suppose a person makes a transaction of 1 lakh from his account to another account. So from let's assume that he transfers 1 lakh from his account to some other account. So let's assume that a company has built a banking application, and we are taking only one feature which a banking application has. So let's consider the case of transferring money from one account to another account. So a developer has built this particular application which has the feature to transfer money from one account to another account. So now let's consider a case without testing this, if we have deployed the application to the production environment. And so in the production, what happened is when an amount of 1 lakh is transferred from one account to, let's assume that we are trying to transfer the money from account 1 to account 2. So after deploying the application to production, so what people noticed is when a person transferred 1 lakh from account 1 to account 2, so what people noticed is the balance in his account is not getting updated. So let's assume that before transferring the amount, so the balance in his particular account was 2 lakhs, and after transferring this 1 lakh amount, so even after that, so his balance is remaining the same as 2 lakhs. So if people have noticed this in production, so then this is nothing but this is a case of a loss occurring to the business. So in order to avoid these kind of issues, what happens is application whichever is developed by the development teams will be properly tested. And there are few reasons because of which the testing of application can't be done in development environments. So because of that, what happens is people will do the testing of application in testing environments. Now, so what happens is you know like we as a Salesforce DevOps engineer, we will be primarily involved in provisioning or creating these environments and migrating the application code from one environment to another environment. So in order to migrate code from one environment to another environment, so we have multiple tools. And one more thing is like instead of directly migrating the application code from one environment to another environment, what happens is like people will first push the code to something called as version control systems. So we'll push the code to a version control system again. So there are some reasons for this as well. So in if we directly migrate the code from environment to environment directly without pushing the code to version control system, what happens is like there are some kind of issues which occur. In order to avoid that, people will push the code to version control system, and later what happens is like from version control system code will be deployed or pushed to environments. So now these are the things which will happen in the process of delivering an application. So now ultimately, so after the development of application gets completed in the development environment, it will be moved to testing environment, and from there it will be moved to production environment. So like if you look at the things that are happening here, so if you look at the things, so one is we will be required to create environments, and we will be required to migrate code from one environment to another environment, so by pushing it to version control system. So these will be the primary things which will be you which you will be doing as a Salesforce DevOps engineer. Now when it comes to the creation of environment, so creating an environment on Salesforce platform is a very simple thing. So creating an environment on a Salesforce platform is very simple thing, because it's we can click an environment just by point and clicking. So we are not required to take care of the underlying infrastructure. So when it comes to creating this environment on some other platforms, so it is somewhat a complex task when we compare it with the Salesforce environment creation process. Because if you take an example of creating an environment on Amazon web service, or on Azure platform, so what happens is there will be a lot of things which you should take care of. So we are not required to have any understanding on how we can create on an environment on other platforms. So we should have an understanding on how we can create an environment on Salesforce platform. But when it comes to creating an environment on Salesforce platform, so it is a very simple thing. So that's the reason we are not going to concentrate much on this. I'm going to show you how we can create these things, but it will be a very simple thing. So apart from this, the other thing is migrating the code from one environment to another environment, and pushing the code from an environment to a version control system. So these are the primary things which you will be doing as a Salesforce DevOps engineer, from pushing the code from an environment to version control system. Okay, so these are the major kind of activities which you will be doing. So first, what we will do is we will learn how we can migrate code from one environment to another environment. So this can be achieved by using the build tools. So first we will learn this, when it comes to migrating code from one environment to another environment. So what happens with Salesforce is generally, in order to build an application, what happens is people will create a lot of components. If you take an example of a simple web application, so what are all the components which make an web application is they will have something called as pages, and these pages will be linked to something called as controllers or classes, and so there will be a database in the backend. So there will be something called as database in the backend. So primarily on a high level, these will be the components that will be part of a web application which is built on on some other platform other than Salesforce. But when it comes to Salesforce, so what happens is even whatever be the application, whether the application is on Salesforce platform or on some other platform, so application is nothing but it is a collection of components. So when it comes to an application on Salesforce, what happens is there will be a lot of variety of components. So there are some 450 to 500 variety of components available on Salesforce platform. So what happens is in order to migrate certain types of components, there are some kind of rules which you should keep in mind. So when it comes to the migration of certain components, it will be somewhat straightforward. But when it comes to the migration of some other components, there are few points which you should be kept in mind. So that's the reason what we will do is first we will understand what how we can migrate some few different types of Salesforce components. So after that, once you get an understanding on how we can migrate certain types of Salesforce components, what we will do is like we will move on to how we can move the application code from a Salesforce environment to version control system. After that, so like we will see how we can deploy the application code from version control system to a Salesforce environment. So now what I will do next is like I will show you an example of how we can deploy migrate the Salesforce components using a tool called as Workbench. Now, when it comes to Workbench, so like Workbench is it is a web-based tool, and it is a tool which comes by integrating with a Salesforce account. So it will be available on all of the Salesforce accounts. If we enable a specific permission in inside a Salesforce org, what happens is anyone who has that particular permission will be able to access all of the users, all of the features of this particular tool. So now we will see how we can migrate the things using this tool called as Workbench. So in order to do that, what I will do is I will pick two Salesforce environments or orgs. And one more thing is on Salesforce environment or org is nothing but it is a shorthand notation for organization, environment or organization or account or sandbox or server. So even we can sometimes people will also call Salesforce environments as server as well. So all of these means the same. So mostly on Salesforce platform, we people what people will call these instances is they will call them as orgs. Now, in order to show you how I will migrate the things using Workbench, what I will do is I will pick two orgs. I will consider one as a dev org and the other one as a QA org. So as of now, I already have these two orgs. I will open those two orgs. I will create a component first in dev org, and I will show you how I can how we can migrate that particular component using Workbench. So what I will do is I'm not showing you how we can create a Salesforce org now. I will show you that in the next session, when we start the actual course. So for now, what I will do is I will log into the dev org. So I will log into the dev org which I already have. So in order to log into a Salesforce account, we should use this URL, which is called as login.salesforce.com. So I'm simply opening this URL and I will log into the dev org, the org which I have logged in just now. We will consider this as the dev org. So let me quickly show you the username of this particular org. Okay, so if you look at the username of this particular user, so it is ending with .com. So now what I will do is in another window, so I will log into a different org in incognito window. So the reason why I'm doing this is we can't log into two Workbench accounts in the same window of a browser. So we can log into two Salesforce accounts in the same window of a browser, but you can't log into two Salesforce Workbench accounts in the same window of a browser. That's the reason I have opened an incognito window. Here, what I will do is I will log into the QA org which I have. Okay, so after this, what I will do is I will also quickly log into the Workbench as well. So I will log into the Workbench of the dev org which I have, as well as I will log into the Workbench of QA org as well. So in order to log into Workbench, you can simply type in Workbench, and so generally, if you simply type in Workbench in the browser, what happens is you will find this as the first result, workbench.developerforce.com as the first result. So here what I'm doing is I'm simply checking this particular checkbox. Now all of the developer so what happens is in order to practice what happens is we will create trial Salesforce accounts. So generally all of these trial Salesforce accounts are of type developer edition. So all of the developer edition type of Salesforce accounts are equivalent to production environments. So while practicing with these trial accounts, you can keep this environment to production. So I will click on login. I will also log into the Workbench of QA instance in the another window. So I will type in Workbench And so I will log in to the Workbench account of QA org. So now if you look at the username, so like username with which I have logged into this particular Workbench, so it is ending with QA in the end. And if I go to the other Workbench account, so it is, sorry, I again opened the incognito. Okay, so if you look at the username, it is ending with .com. So like this is the Workbench account of the developer, and the one which I opened in incognito window is the Workbench account of the QA org. So now, in order to show you like how we can migrate things, what I will do is I'll quickly create a component. So forget about even if you are unable to understand like how I am creating the component, so forget about that part. So like just concentrate on how I'm trying to migrate the component from this environment to another environment. Like once the actual session begins, so I will whenever I create a component, I will give you a brief background of the component as well. So I will tell you on what is the purpose of the component and how we can create that particular component. For now, like what I am doing is like I am trying to create one component inside this particular object. So we have an object called as account, and in this object, what I will do is I'll quickly create a field. And I will create I will name that particular field as demo field. So what I will do is I will name it as DevOps demo. So I will give some random values for the other things, and okay, so I will keep the default options on all of the other pages, and I will simply click on save. So forget about the purpose and what are all the pages which we were prompted while creating that particular field. So what I have done is like I have created a field inside account object in my default. So this is nothing but I have created a component. So generally in real time, what happens is like developers will create these components. We won't create it. So for now, so the component which I have created is I have created a field whose name is DevOps demo. Now, when it comes to a component on Salesforce platform, so what happens is like each component will have a type, and each component will have a name associated with it. So now the component which I created is a component of type field. So generally, the exact name for field type is custom field. It's not just the field, but the exact name for field type is custom field. So I said that like for every component, there will be a type associated with it, as well as there will be a name associated with that particular component. Now, when it comes to the names, what happens is like for every component whichever you create on Salesforce platform, so like every component will be associated with two names. So one will be called as the label name, and the other one will be called as API name. So in order to migrate component from one environment to another environment, we will make use of something called as API name. So we are not worried about the label name and the normal name. So we will be making use of the API names. So in order to migrate component from one environment to another environment, so what you should know is like you should know that type, you should know the type of that particular component, and you should also know the API name of that particular component. So if you know this, you can proceed with the next steps. So like after you know the name and type of the components, so the next thing is you need to prepare an XML file. So you need to prepare an XML file, and in this particular XML file, you should specify the components that should be migrated. So next is, so like once you have the name and type of the components, so what I will do is let me keep the a request in this way. Let's assume that I got a request. I got a request asking to migrate the below component. So from dev org to QA org. So when I got that request, let's assume that I got this request via an email, and in that request they have clearly specified the name of the component which I need to be migrated is DevOps underscore demo underscore C, and they have specified the type of the component as custom field. Okay, so let's assume that I got the request in this manner. So now what I will do is like in order to migrate the component from one environment to another environment, you should prepare something called as XML file. So the reason why we should prepare this XML file is as of now, like this particular component is present somewhere on the Salesforce server, which like on the server there is some kind, like there is some space which got created for this particular all, and this particular component is present there. And like for every instance, what happens is like on the server there will be a separate space which gets created. So this particular field is available on the dev space which got created on the Salesforce server. So now I need to retrieve the code file whichever is related to this particular component, and I need to deploy this component to the QA org. So in order to do that, so I'm saying that I need to prepare an XML file. So in the XML file, what we will do is like we'll specify the name and type of the components whose code files are needed to be retrieved. So like in this particular component XML file, we will specify the name and type of the components whichever we need to migrate. Specify the name and type of the component. Now, in order to prepare this XML file, so generally like what happens is like in real time, there are like few kind of extensions available. So like by making use of that particular extension, what happens is like you can directly generate the package.xml without manually typing in it. So like before seeing how we can make use of extensions. So like first, in order to understand the structure of the XML, so first we will try to prepare the XML file manually, and in later sessions, what we will do is like we will see how we can generate the XML using extensions. So like in order to prepare this XML file, so XML is nothing but generally like when it comes to XML language. So what happens is like XML language is nothing but it is a collection of tags. So generally in XML language, like whenever you write a file in XML language, what happens is like you will see something called as tags. So like in XML file, like we will see lot of tags. So now, so while preparing the package.xml, so like in order to just get the skeleton of the package.xml file, what you can do is like you can make use of Salesforce documentation. So like there are like a lot of Salesforce standard documentations available. So you can type in something called as sample package.xml Salesforce, and what happens is like there is like a Salesforce documentation which will provide you with a basic skeleton of the package.xml. So now what I will do is I will simply copy this skeleton whichever I got in this particular document, and what I will do is I will prepare an XML file on my machine. So XML file is nothing but any file which has an extension of .xml. So now what I will do is on my personal system, I will prepare an XML file. So I already have one. So what I will do is I will remove all of these lines. So I'll copy the content whichever I have copied on that particular document. So now when it comes to preparing the XML file, so what happens is like for all of the XML package.xml, so for all of the XML files, so whichever we use for the deployments, so these lines remains the same. So like you're not required to remember these set of lines. What happens is like these lines remains the same for all of the XML files. So when it comes to the first two lines, what happens is like these tells the uh, the processor to which we are going to send this particular request. So that these two lines tells that particular processor or system that this is an XML file. So that is the meaning of these two files. Now when it comes to the tags that will be used in XML file, so every tag in an XML file should have a opening tag as well as the closing tag. So every tag, suppose let's assume that if you want to make use of a tag whose name is name, so then that particular tag should have a opening tag and it should have a closing tag as well. So the difference between the closing tag and opening tags is nothing but you will see a slash character, like an extra slash character just before the name of that particular tag. So this particular thing, so this is an example of opening tag, and this is an example of closing tag. Now one more thing is like if a particular tag does not have any content inside it, so then if a particular tag does not have any content inside it, so you can simply close the tag in this manner. So this is equivalent to, so like what I did is like I have opened the tag and closed the tag here itself. So this particular line is equivalent to, so this thing. So this is equivalent to this. So like if any tag does not have any contents inside it, you can simply use the tag in this manner as well. So now So what is happening here is like if you see here, so we have an XML tag. So like XML tag is started here and it got closed here. That's the reason we are not seeing any ending tag for that particular XML. So when you see the package tag, it is getting started here and it is ending here. And there is one more tag which is called as version. So version is getting started here and version is getting ended here. So there is some number that is present inside this particular version. So now the reason why people will specify a version number in Salesforce platform is like every Salesforce org or account will be associated with a version number. So like if you see here on the workbench, so it is saying that the version number of this particular org is 58.0. So the reason why we will see this particular version number on each and every Salesforce org is like when Salesforce first launched its product. So when it first launched its product, the version number was 1.0, and for all of the upgrades whichever it made, so like it upgraded the version number. So as of now, it's like there are 58 releases that got happened on the Salesforce product. So that's the reason we are seeing the number as 58. So for every org, you will see this particular number which is called as version number. So we will generally call this as API version. So now the version number that you need to specify in the package.xml should be less than or equal to the version number on which your org is present. So as of now, like my org is on version 58. So like I can either specify 58 or any number less than 57, but I can't specify any number more than 58. So that's how you will specify the version number in the package.xml, like in the XML file. So while coming to naming this particular file, so like it is not a mandatory rule to name the file as package.xml, but mostly what happens is like people will name it as package.xml. So we can use any name, but the file extension should be .xml. So the name can be anything, but it should end with an extension called as .xml, but the name can be anything. So there is no strict rule on the name that should be used. But what happens is in all of the real time projects, they will name the file as package only. Like they won't use any other names. Now, now next thing is I'm saying that these set of four lines will remain the same, and like if you want to remember, you can remember. Otherwise, you can simply copy the skeleton from the Salesforce document, and you can make use of that particular lines. Now, after this, like you should make use of types tag and members tag and name tag. So like you should make use of these tags in the package.xml file. That's it. Like these will be the only three tags that which you will make use of, apart from the four lines which were present like before I added these three lines here. So just you will make use of these three tags only. That's it. Apart from these three tags, you won't make use of any other tag in package.xml files or the XML files, which will be used in order to retrieve and migrate the code. So now every, like as I said, every tag should have a closing tag as well as opening tag. So now the members and name tag should be present inside the type tag or types tag. So I will close the types tag here, and so I will open the members tag here itself, and I will open the name close the name tag here. Okay, so as of now, what I did is I added a types tag to this particular XML file. Now, the number of types tag in your XML file should be equal to the number of components which you number of types of components which you want to migrate. As of now, in our request, there is only one type of component that needs to be migrated. So I have added one types of tag, and the number of name tags under or inside each type tag will be equal to one. So there will be only one name tag inside each types tag, and the number of members tags inside each types tags will be equal to the number of components of that particular type, number of components which you need to migrate of that particular type. As of now, there is only one component of the custom field type which I need to migrate. So for the members tag, you should specify the API name of the component which you need to migrate. So like the API name of the component which I need to migrate now is DevOps underscore demo. So like I can even copy it from the org instead of typing it here. So if I go here, so I can copy the API name, and let me go here. I will paste the name here. So like you should specify the API name of the component for members, and for name you should specify the type of the component. So generally, like while preparing the package.xml, so in order to get the API name and type of the particular component, what you will do is you will make use of Workbench. So in Workbench, like Workbench will be useful in order to get the names as well as the type of the component. Suppose that, let's assume that like as of now, like what I did is like I took the request in this manner. Let's assume that, so instead of this, like I got the request in this manner. For the type, the developer has specified the type as field. So instead of custom field, the developer has specified the type as field instead of custom field. So now, in order to check the exact type of a specific component, what you can do is in Workbench, like if you click on info, like you will see something called as metadata types and components. So here, what happens is like when you click on metadata types and components, like here ideally like generally like for your case, like the reason why it is displaying a search box for me is uh, I have added a extension here, but for you, what happens is like it will display a drop down. So now what I did is like when I typed in field, so I got these results. So like if you look at the results that are available for field, I can see something called as custom field, and there is something called as field restriction rule, and field set and workflow field update. So like looking at this, like by making of this particular option, you can copy the exact type name of a particular component. So as of now, like what I did is after selecting custom field, so I have opened the account object because this particular field is present inside account object. And here, if you see here, I have opened that particular field here. So here you will see all of the details related to a specific component. So out of the details that are getting displayed here, so the name whichever gets displayed here should be the name which you should use between the members tag, and the value whichever gets displayed for type should be the value which you should specify for the in between the name tag. So like as of now, like if you look at the value that is getting displayed here under full name, so the name is account dot devops underscore demo underscore underscore c. So like this should be the name. So the name whichever gets displayed for full name property in Workbench should be the name which we should use in between members tags in package.xml, and the type which gets displayed, the value which gets displayed for type in Workbench should be the value that should be specified for name tag. So as of now, like this is the correct type value. So after this, so once you prepare the package.xml, so what you should do is like you should do the retrieval first. The next step is like after preparing the package.xml, so you should take a retrieval, and after taking the retrieval, you should deploy the you should perform a deployment. So generally, like in order to migrate the components from one environment to another environment, we will do these two steps. One is retrieval. So the reason why we will do retrieval is, so in order to get the code file of that particular component from the server wherever it is located, or from the org wherever it is present. And the reason why we will do the deployment is like in order to add that particular component to the org into which we want to migrate that particular piece of code. So now when it comes to doing the retrieval operation using Workbench, so you can do it by making use of this operation, which is getting displayed under migration tab here. So I'll click on retrieve, and as of now, like my this particular package.xml in is present inside a folder whose name is this sfdx hyphen project hyphen vp1. So I would have saved it in a different folder, but let's make use of this particular file. So now what I will do is, after clicking on retrieve, I will click on choose file, and it is present inside this particular folder. So let me quickly open that particular folder. So the package.xml file is present inside this particular folder. So I have just selected the file, like file based on the location which where it is present on my system. So after selecting the file, so I have just chosen the package.xml file. apart from this, apart from the choose file option, like there are a couple of options that are getting displayed here. So forget about these options for now. So we'll see the meaning of those options later. And I clicked on next, and next I will click on retrieve. So when we click on retrieve, what happens is like a request will be sent to the org or the server, and what happens is it will like process the XML file, and like it will give us the component code files of the components whichever are specified in the XML file which we have used in this particular retrieve request. So if I download this particular file, like what I got is when I sent the request, I got this particular zip file as a response. So I just downloaded that particular zip file. Let me quickly open that particular file. So if I open that particular file, there is a folder with this name. Forget about this name. So apart from that folder, you can see something called as objects folder, and inside objects folder there is a file. So this is nothing but the code file of that particular component. So in Salesforce, what happens is like when you create a component from the UI, automatically a code file gets generated, and Salesforce will store the details of that particular component in this particular code file. Now, this is the code file of that particular component which was stored in the dev or server or uh, dev org itself. So now what I will do is I will next I will, as I got this particular zip file. So generally this particular zip file will be called as metadata zip file. So next thing is like I got the zip file or the component code file. So in order to deploy that particular component to the other org, I will make use of that particular zip file which I got as a response in the retrieve operation. So here, in the incognito window, as of now, I am on the Workbench account of my QA org. So here under migration, I will click on deploy, and I will choose the zip file which I got as a response in the earlier step. So I'm selecting that particular zip file, and so there are few other options that are getting displayed here. So forget about the meaning of these options. We will look into the meaning of these options later. I will click on next, and I will click on deploy. So when we click on deploy, so what happens is this particular component will be deploy is nothing but it is an automatic way of adding a component to another server. So adding a component is nothing but, so what we did is like we created that particular component manually in the dev org. So deployment is nothing but it will automatically do all of those steps which we did in order to create it. So even the deployment, what it will do is like it will create the component with the name and the details whichever we have given for that particular component while creating it in the dev org. So but what happens is like instead of we doing it, the system will automatically take care of it. So now if you look at the status of this particular deploy operation, we can see the status has succeeded. So that means the deploy operation is successful. That means the component got successfully added to this particular org. So here I will go to this particular account object, and in fields and relationships, so like if I search for DevOps, so I can see the DevOps demo field here in this particular QA org. So this is how you can migrate a component from one environment to another environment using Workbench. So the process that remains the same, but what happens is there are few rules which you should be kept in mind while migrating certain types of components. So I will show you a couple of when we start the actual session, I will show you a couple of more examples with the Workbench, and after that we will move on to SFDX. So basically what happens is with Workbench as well as with SFDX, we will just learn how we can migrate the components, as well as what are all the points which we should be kept in mind while migrating certain types of components. So that's how we will cover the SFDX and Workbench. So okay, so I will stop the session here, and so that's it from me for today. You can let me come back to the screen. Okay, so you can provide your feedback to the institute people, and so based on that, we will start with the actual course from the next session. So if you have any questions regarding the course, you can stay back and ask me. Otherwise, you can drop off.
Hello.
Yeah, yeah,
Hello.
Thiru. Yes, Thiru, I can hear.
Hi, Sajid.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have explained very well. Thanks. First of all, thanks for your demo, Sai.
Yeah, thank you.
But Sai, like basically, I don't know. I'm not aware of this Salesforce DevOps. But what is the job opportunities for this Salesforce DevOps? But I think there is a DevOps for AWS, Azure, and other cloud. But basically, we don't know. Is there any opportunities for this Salesforce DevOps? The growth of Salesforce DevOps. Can you give
Yes.
me the brief explanation of this? What is the future of this DevOps in Salesforce Cloud, Sai?
Yeah, yeah. So, like in order to explain the number of openings which we have available for this particular role. So now, like if you take the this particular role of DevOps engineer, what happened is these DevOps roles evolved in the market in the last some 3 or 4 years. Like what happened is it's not the DevOps roles were not available in the industry like before the past 4 years. Like these roles were there, but what happened is like companies started using the DevOps process on the project from the past 4 or 5 years. So generally, like what happened is that's the reason we saw a lot of openings for DevOps roles in the past 4 or 5 years. And one thing is when it comes to the Salesforce DevOps role, so companies started implementing the DevOps process on Salesforce projects from the past 2 or 3 years. Like majority of the companies, what happened is like some 80 to 90% of the companies started implementing the DevOps process from the past 2 to 3 years only. So now when you what is happening with this particular role is we don't have as many as resources in the market which are in order to meet the demand. So this particular role is in the evolving stage, so that means like there are very less number of resources available in the market which are not meeting the exact demand. So as it is in the evolving stage, so what happens is the number of openings are good, even in today's market scenario. Like if you take the Indian market, so for every week, definitely you will be scheduled with at least one interview. So this is in the evolving stage. Like what happens is if you if you move back to if you take the coming years, what happens definitely you will be in demand only. So it's not like that there won't be any openings for this particular role. So definitely there will be some good number of openings for this particular role now. But when we compare the Salesforce DevOps role with the normal DevOps role, so generally the AWS DevOps engineer or Azure DevOps engineer, so those kind of things will be applicable to platforms other than Salesforce platform. So what happens is those will be applicable to all other kind of applications, like the applications built using .NET, PHP, Java, or any other kind of language. So what happens is when you take the number of openings on the a general DevOps platform, the number of openings will be more because that is applicable to a lot of variety of technologies. But when it comes to the this particular Salesforce DevOps role, what happens is it is specifically applicable for the applications built on Salesforce platform. So that when you compare the number of roles, the number of roles will be less, but as it is in the evolving phase, and as there are not much number of resources available in the market, so definitely there is a great chance in order to crack a position for this particular role.
But we have weird news, but most of the companies in Salesforce cloud, the developers they will deploy automatically by using chains set or again the latest one DevOps Center.
Hmm.
Salesforce has released one DevOps Center, so they will do themselves by using DevOps Center or chain set deployment. Is it true? Like, is there any threat for this separate DevOps engineer side?
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to chain sets deployment, so chain sets with the help of chain sets, it doesn't support pushing the code to version control system. So, with the help of chain sets, we can't achieve DevOps process. And apart from that, so you may tell developers will even apart from chain sets, developers will also make use of some other tools as well. But the point to be noted here is not only on the Salesforce platform, even when you take the other platforms, like before the DevOps roles came into picture. So how the migration of the code used to happen on other platforms is even on those platforms as well. Developers used to take care of the migration process as well. But when we keep this migration activity in the hands of developers, what happens is they won't be able to concentrate on the development of application. So they won't be able to concentrate on the development of application, and it will in order to build a specific application, what happens is the amount of time that will be required will be somewhat more when we hand over this particular activity to DevOps engineers, sorry, the developers. So that's the reason these separate roles got evolved. Instead of keeping this DevOps activity also in the hands of developers, what happened is people started hiring separate resources, and they hand over these activities to the DevOps engineer. So it's not only to the Salesforce platform, even for on the other platforms, it used to the developers used to take care of the migration activities. But nowadays, what happened is there are few disadvantages for that. Instead of developers handling this particular activity, what is happening is DevOps engineers are handling these activities. And one more thing is as I said, with chain sets and the DevOps Center. So DevOps Center is a recent tool which was launched by Salesforce itself. So it is not it is not completely it is not available with the complete set of features. So it is a kind of beta version. So we are not sure when the complete version will be available, and even when that particular DevOps center comes into picture, what happens is definitely there will be separate resources in order to handle this particular activity. So we want to definitely keep this in the hands of developers.
Okay. So in future there is no threat for DevOps, Salesforce DevOps in here. You mean to say?
Yes, yes. So because as long as the demand for Salesforce platform will be there, and as long as people continue to run their applications on the Salesforce platform, definitely you will see openings for this particular role. So there is no doubt in
Even
that.
though, even though if they will develop totally on Salesforce DevOps Center, though they need to hire for this separate.
Yes, so
Uh,
definitely, yes, definitely there should be one at least one resource for a project in order to do this activity.
okay. Sai, in this course content, are you explaining all the configuration part for the YAML file automatic deployment?
Yes, yes. So we are going to cover YAML scripting, and I will show you how we can build a pipeline using YAML scripting.
And then open SSL certificate to server key.
Yes, yes. So OpenSSL is a small thing. In order to authenticate a system, so in a secure way, we will make use of these certificates. Yeah. So that is a very minor thing. Yeah, we are going to cover that as well. So what happens is when you have a Git provider, if you want to deploy code from Git provider to Salesforce, you should create something called as connected app in Salesforce, and after that you should create a set of certificates, and by using that particular set of certificates, you will authenticate the Salesforce system from another Git provider. So we are going to cover all those.
But you have main given as GitHub. In the same way, you can explain GitLab or only version control system as GitHub. Sai.
No, no. So what we are going to cover is we are going to cover two Git providers. One is GitHub and the other one is Bitbucket. So, when you get an understanding on how we can implement things on one Git provider, definitely you will be in a situation to implement these things on other Git providers as well. Now what will vary with each and every Git provider is there won't be any major differences, because each Git provider will come with Git integrated in them. So apart from that, there will be some other features on top of that. So more or less the features will be the same. So the primary difference would be it depends on the kind of project management tools which a specific project makes use of. But other than that, there won't be any specific difference, major differences between these Git providers.
Okay. Okay, Sai. One more thing on the JWT access token is also there.
JWT. So that is how we will in order to make use of that SSL certificates, we will make use of JWT only. So JWT is an authorization flow.
Yes, yes, Sai.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Thanks a
all
lot,
of them
Sai.
will be covered. Yes, all of them will be covered.
How many days it will take to complete the course, Sai?
It will take around some 25 to 30 days. I can't assure you exact number. So I think it will be completed in 25 days. 25 to 30, something in between that.
Totally this Salesforce DevOps, right?
Yes, yes.
Hello, Sai. I'm Samir here.
Yeah, Samir.
Yes, actually, I just want to know like what are the topics you are going to cover in this session, and what are the Copado only, and how much time it will take to complete the Copado session and all.
So when it comes to the tools which we are going to cover, so I'm not only going to cover Copado. So I said that I'm going to cover something called as SFDX. So like SFDX is the foundation for all of the other tools. Like all of these tools will make use of SFDX only in the backend. So we are going to cover SFDX, and after that Copado. After Copado, we are going to see how we can set up the process using SFDX and GitHub and SFDX plus Bitbucket, and I will give you a overview on how we can set up the things using AutoRabbit and how we can set up the things using Copado Essential. So like it comes up to some 4 to 5 tools because each one
Okay.
of this is a different tool. So when
Okay,
it comes to
understood.
Copado, like only for Copado, it will take around 1 week.
Okay, okay. Because actually I have a 2 year of experience in Salesforce, so I just want to learn the Copado deployment and all. So
Mhm.
like so that's the reason I ask you like how much it will take because you
Yeah,
already said
sure.
it will take hardly take 1 week to complete that Copado
Mm.
session.
Mm.
So that's fine then.
Yeah. Yeah, so even though if you want to just learn Copado, like you should have some understanding on Git as well. So
Ye-
generally, like in
Yes,
order to understand Copado completely, you should definitely have an
yeah,
understanding on Git as well.
yeah. I have an understanding on the Git repo.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, so then
So
okay,
can
so
I
then it's
register for a specific Copado Git related this course and all? If you have a separate course and all, like because you are going to teach us all the complete 4 to 5 tools. So if I just want to learn those two tools,
Mhm.
do you have any kind of like option if I can register that course?
So what you can do is you can inform the same to the institute people. So you can tell them
Okay.
that please notify me when the Copado session gets started. They will
Mhm.
notify you. You can join from then, and you can drop off once the Copado concepts gets completed.
Okay.
Uh, Sai, under the
Yeah.
same thing, how many days it will take to complete all the GAMLs scripting under the Salesforce configuration setup from the GitHub? Even I need to join those things, Sai, not all the things.
So that will hardly that will be completed in some 3 to 4 sessions only because 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 sessions. So like I will give you a basic of shell scripting. After that, I will tell you YAML scripting. So it will be completed mostly in some 4 to 5 sessions only. We can close this session. Thank you all.